Centers for Spiritual Living in CSLDallas are invoking the power of prayer and meditation, along with spiritually grounded moral call to our political and faith leaders dedicated to healing the consciousness of racism in America. Spiritual leaders throughout the ages have discovered their moral obligation to call forth a new vision for humanity, based in the spiritual teachings of the world's greatest scriptures. In our Judeo-Christian culture, this began with the Hebrew prophets, reminding the kings of Israel that without a moral compass and a spiritual grounding, the state will fail. These prophets sought to revolutionize the people and to awaken humanity to a moral compass of law and faith. Jesus carried the message to the priests and the people, preaching a revolutionary gospel of love. Not only a love of the divine, but also a love for neighbor and self. He too exhorted the leaders and the people to find common ground with those unlike themselves, both Gentile and Jew, Hebrew and Greek, for the good of the individual as well as the state. He sought to revolutionize spirituality and awaken humanity to an inner compass of love. Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses on the door of Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany, citing the sale of indulgences as the prime example of the corruption of the church. Sparking the Protestant Reformation, he revolutionized Christianity by urging the people to learn the spiritual teachings themselves so as not to be held hostage or beguiled by the wealth and power of the church. He sought to revolutionize where power and authority live in spirituality and to awaken humanity to our own ability to discern our inner compass of truth. Our American Revolution and our founding documents continued this revolution of awakening humanity to the possibilities and potential for each life in the context of civil society, by creating a nation based on the premise that all men are created equal and endowed with the inalienable right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These men were prophets of a new idea, revolutionizing government, awakening humanity to the worth of each individual, and creating a compass that has led us toward greater and greater human rights. Of course, we know that at the time that only meant male property owners who were primarily white. Slaves, actually black men, were counted as 3/5 of a person, and no woman counted at all. But the die was cast and the revolution continued. People sought to expand their understanding of the prophecy that all men are created equal, and to find the moral and spiritual fiber to claim it for themselves and for each other. So came the abolitionists, the women's suffragists, the civil rights movements, the ADA, gay pride, and the dreamers. Over the course of time, all men has been stretched to encompass and understood to include all. This broadening was the result of good, decent, spiritually grounded people and motivated people engaging in self-examination and performing a profound moral inventory on themselves and on our country, examining the results of this prophetic history and ongoing revolution. Every person made in the image and likeness of the divine creator, imbued with inalienable rights, is in fact included in all men. Except they aren't. Not in practice. Not in the persistent ways that our culture holds on to beliefs about groups of people, especially black people, especially black men. Once again, it becomes the moral obligation of prophets like Martin Luther King Jr. to awaken humanity to those that were kept out of the revolution, those who were not included in the equality of all human beings. Martin Luther King Jr. sought once again to broaden the revolution to the blacks and African Americans in our nation by awakening us to our moral compass of inclusion, respect, and the dignity of every life. And yet the last few years has shown us that this revolution is not over. What creates this pernicious undercurrent of racism, even fear of black people, especially of black men? It is because there are still underlying beliefs held in the psyche of America that causes us to fear a powerful black man and despise a strong black woman. The grandeur of America is its open arms and our outrageous belief in the possibility and potential of every single human being. When some cannot come to the banquet, and others are murdered at the feast. There is a cancer eating away at the heart of America, tainting its very soul. This cancer is the unconsciously held beliefs about blacks, which are at odds with our spoken values of the rights and dignities of humanity. So there is an underbelly in the consciousness of America. Just as we subconsciously cling to the beliefs that are wrong, outdated, and dangerous, so parts of the America psyche is holding on to old fears generated lifetimes ago in the ships and markets and fields of slaves. Can we imagine proud warriors ripped from their tribes and strong matriarchs torn from their families, arriving in the Americas half-starved, but with an insatiable anger and a burning desire for freedom? Can we imagine slave owners with a shattered moral and spiritual compass becoming fearful of these powerful warriors and strong women? Fear creates anger and the need to suppress, which only invites more resistance. Thus, violence begets violence until death or defeat is the result. Yet the stories starred these men are angry and strong. That the stories stated let me read it again, I'm so sorry. Yet the stories stated, these men are angry and strong, be afraid, don't let them lift their heads for a second. And these women, they won't listen. They're too full of themselves to do what they're told. Break them down. Don't let them lift their heads for a second. And more death and defeat is the result. Now what happens over time is individual stories pass into generic stories. These become legends. The legends become myth. And the myths fade from the conscious mind. But the lingering odor of these stories merge into the fabric of the psyche as underlying beliefs, assumptions, and perspectives about life that are at odds with the values of an awakened humanity and the moral compass provided by this ongoing revolution that we are engaged in. This is the consciousness that cries out for healing. This is the consciousness that perpetuates racism, the murdering of black women and men without justice or change. Simone Weil, the great French philosopher and the only 20th century Catholic saint, writes, "How then shall we define injustice? Injustice is this cry of a soul being hurt. The soul of our black brothers and sisters and the soul of America is being hurt by the injustice of racism. This racism is so plainly against the values of America and the moral compass of spirituality that it is crying out to be healed. A prophetic voice is called for, or the state will fail and the people shall perish. So we, faith leaders and members of Centers for Spiritual Living, we lift our prophetic voices together with all faith leaders of every tradition, and we call for a healing of these unconscious beliefs, subconscious fears, and sometimes outright lies. We seek to bring this consciousness to the surface to be healed. Centers for Spiritual Living believes in the unity of all life and the oneness of humanity. We believe that the highest God and the innermost God is one God. We believe that God is personal to all who feel this indwelling presence. We believe that all people are the divine spark and to have a divine right to express their best self. We value the compassionate heart, the disciplined mind, and the creative power inherent in every human being. Standing on the shoulders of the spiritual prophets before us, we are here to awaken humanity to its magnificence. We exhort our leaders, both faith and political, to answer the call of love, compassion, unity, integrity, decency, and equity. As spiritual leaders and people of faith, we know and believe in the power of the word of prayer and the healing intention in group meditation. So today, we gather to speak our word for the continuation of the revolution of humanity. We speak our word for the evolution of our culture into its truest and highest potential, seeing each and every person as a valued, important member of the whole. We speak our word for the healing of the old beliefs, old wounds, old unforgivenesses, old fear, old resentment, old hatred, and old separation. These have no place in our hearts, for they cloud our spiritual and moral compass. We speak our word for the restoration of the grand experiment, the revolutionary ideas, love your neighbor as yourself. All people are created equal. All people are part of one human family.